welcome back to another episode of the Boropolis Podcast. And I'm trying to work it out. It's been 7 games, I think, now. So probably for the 7th episode in a row, possibly 6, given that we've had a few midweek games. Boro still haven't been beat. What is going on, Nathan? And I'm going to ask you how you are, but I'm pretty sure you'll be excellent, to be honest.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent. But yeah, it's what a run this is turning out to be, really. Gone pretty much nearly 2 months unbeaten, which is not Boro-like at all. And the late show continues, doesn't it?
Yeah, the late show continues. And before we start, I've got to throw a quick disclaimer out there, to be honest. There's a hell of a song going around at the moment about Matt Crooks' hair. And I mean, we'll get into it later in depth, to be honest. And, the song sort of mentions his hair being fine. One haircut that isn't fine is this at the moment. That hasn't been cut for weeks. So I apologise for people watching. Last week I went with a cap because it was that bad, but hopefully for the next episode it's being cut because, I feel ashamed to be on camera with this. But we should continue and not care about my hair because there's only one man's hair, which we should be talking about, as we will later. Getting into the podcast, Nathan, of course, before we go into the game, because of the way the uploads fell, we seem to just turn into the recruitment, I don't even know what to call it, the recruitment geniuses last week and decided that we were just signing whoever we wanted. Of course, we've got Balogun over the line and added to Connolly, of course, earlier in the window, but we've covered that one. We also added Riley McGree, and on the back of the last podcast, we actually thought that he was signing for Celtic. So, I mean, for both of them, really exciting signings, to be honest, Nathan.
Yeah, they are really exciting signings, and they'll only add to this group that we've currently got. This group that is on absolute fire at this moment in time with a run of results. But yeah, a shame that McGree couldn't make the squad on Saturday, but we did get our first glimpses of Flo Balogun as well. And yeah, I suppose we'll get into the game a bit later on. But yeah, certainly looks like a decent signing for Boro.
Yeah, and always nice just to really sort of beat Celtic to a signing, to be honest. I know there was a lot of sort of bantering and back and forth between Boro and Celtic fans on Twitter, but it was particularly nice to see that, there was a few little jibes at the Celtic fans because some of the things they said about Middlesbrough were a bit unfair, to be honest. So, in fairness, I think we got our own back really because we got the player that they wanted. So it's all well and good. And yeah, I mean, the Celtic fans are, I don't think we need to get into it, but they had a lot to say about English Championship football, and I think the less said about some of the standard of the SPL is probably best left unsaid, to be honest.
Was just about to say there, yeah, the Championship. I don't know whereabouts Boro, Fulham, the likes of the sides in amongst the Championship playoffs at the minute would finish in the SPL, but yeah, that'd be a certainly interesting conversation and topic.
Yeah, it would be, but of course we don't want to annoy any potential Scottish audience that we may have gained. I'm sure no Celtic fans will be watching or listening, but if they are, better luck next time trying to sign a player when the Boro are also trying for his signature. So yeah, before we get ourselves in trouble with Celtic anymore, we will move on to the Reading game, Nathan, of course, off the back of that Mansfield Cup tie. We spoke about that last week and, the positive result and the positive run and the late goal in that game. I don't think anyone foresaw us doing it again, but of course we'll go into that as we progress through the game. But just in terms of team news going into the Reading game, Nathan, back to really what a lot of people would deem as full strength. And the only real change was in the striker department. And of course, that was Connolly in for Watmore. I mean, I did think that one of the new strikers would start the game. I was probably leaning more towards Balogun, but of course he had a few COVID issues, and that's why the loan move was a little bit delayed. But were you happy to see Connolly get his chance?
Yeah, I was. I think a lot of Boro fans were expecting him to make his first Boro appearance last week at Mansfield in the Cup, but some issues with his deal. I think Brighton had put some sort of clause in his contract to stop him playing in cup games in case he got cup tied and had to go back if any COVID issues were brought up later on in the season. But yeah, a first start for Aaron Connolly for Middlesbrough, and I think we were all quite excited by the prospect of him up front with Andras Sparrar, of course, who had got 3-3 just prior to this in the league. So yeah, a player coming down from the Premier League, playing up front with an informed striker, I think got everyone licking the lips with the prospect of that one.
Yeah, it certainly was exciting, and you sort of expected Boro, really, as they have done, in previous league games at home, that they'd get off on the front foot straight away, to be honest. But, I actually felt that probably early on in the game, not that we started slow in particular, but we certainly didn't start with the intensity that we have done over the previous few league games.
Yeah, I think going into the game, a lot of it was made of the game that Middlesbrough were the bookies' favourites, and by a long way as well. And you could see why going into the game. Reading in the last week had been beat by Kidderminster in the FA Cup, the lowest ranked team left in the competition, and then of course played in the Championship on the Tuesday night and got hammered 7-0 by Fulham at home, which isn't the best thing in the world for a Championship side. But going into the game, of course, Boro were heavy favourites, and a lot of people had predicted a bit of a rout for Middlesbrough, which, as Boro fans, we know that just wasn't going to happen, and this wasn't going to be one of those games where Boro turn up and just roll Reading over. It was going to be a game where Reading are going to try and sit in, try and just hit us on the counter, defend what they had, which of course is a point to start with. And if they got anything more, then that'd be great for them. They were just trying to stop the rot of bad results for them. And their game plan was pretty much stick every man behind the ball apart from Andy Carroll up front, which is completely fine. And in the early stages of the game, it was a bit of a struggle for Middlesbrough to try and break them down. And yeah, that resulted in not too many first half opportunities, really.
Yeah, not too many for either side, to be honest. I think we had probably the greater of the chances. But really, apart from the chances, there was one moment, and it sort of falls in between a couple of the chances that we'll speak about. But sort of almost jumping the gun a little bit just on one incident. Do you think Junior Hoylett deserved to be sent off during that game? Because I was adamant that he should have been.
Yeah, he got booked in the first half, but I'm sure he did another one in the second half, towards the early part of that second half, where I can't remember who the foul was actually on, but I was thinking he's been booked.
Yeah.
And for some reason the referee was reluctant to go to his pocket, but yeah, certainly a strange one. And of course we all know about referees in this division, and maybe that one's been overlooked a bit there. Until you've mentioned that there, Chris, I'd completely forgotten about it. But now you say it, at the time I did pick up on it and think, where's the second yellow card there?
Yeah, I did sort of jump ahead because, of course, we did have chances in the first half, but it just sprung to my mind when he made that quite a bad challenge on Howson in the first half, and I just thought, well, he should have been sent off. But anyway, it didn't prove to be all that important. But just in terms of going into the chances now, first, half chance, I'll call it. The ball falls to Howson on the edge of the box. He hits it first time, decent enough strike. It takes a deflection off, I think, Josh Laurent, and just skips past the post. Luke Southwood in the Reading goal was absolutely beaten. He'd already dived the other way. and I was just waiting for the ball to trickle in the net, to be honest, and it just went past the post. But from my view of the game, it looked like it was just going to roll in.
Yeah, and I think looking at that chance, it pretty much summed up the early half an hour, well, the first half an hour of the game, really. Boro didn't create all too much, and what we did create were sort of just having to be pot shots from distance, really. We didn't have all too many clear-cut chances until a bit later in the first half, when some good work in the midfield switches it out wide to Jones, which, of course, is the main man down that right-hand side. A lot of our chance creation comes from that right, and he puts a fantastic ball across. Spara is there and just strikes the ball at the keeper, and it's sort of cannons off the keeper and then off Laurent and sort of just trickles onto the post. And for a second, you thought it was just going to trickle inside and Boro would be 1-0 up, but it wasn't to be. And Boro going into that, well, sort of the last 5 minutes of the first half, hadn't had all too many chances, and then a flurry of chances for Aaron Connolly make you think, surely we should be 1 or 2 up here.
Yeah, there was the chances, as you say, and of course, like similar to the Howson effort, really, that chance that hits the post from Spara and the deflection of the Reading defender, it just looked like it was going to trickle in, as you say, but it wasn't to be. But as you did mention, of course, Connolly has a couple of chances in the first half, and there was one in particular where, he picked it up on the left and similar to a goal, I'm sure he scored for Brighton against Tottenham. Drives inside onto his right foot and curls a great right-footed effort, and it looked again like it was just going to nestle perfectly into the top corner, but goes over the bar. And that shows what Aaron Connolly can offer and will offer Boro, and especially as he gets fitter and gets a bit of match sharpness back, I'm sure those types of chances will probably hit the back of the net. But just on another Connolly chance, really the last chance of the half, a little bit of a mix-up in the Reading defence, and it led Connolly to go through closer into the box, gets his way into the penalty area and unleashes a left-footed strike, tries to go across Southwood, and Southwood actually saves quite easily. But do you think perhaps actually looking back, he probably should have done better with that one?
Yeah, he should have done. First of all, fantastic anticipating the mistake from the defender. It was a poor touch from Tom Holmes, and he was in Connolly. And I think with a bit more confidence, of course, it only his first Boro start, and really his first game in quite a while now. Maybe with a bit more confidence, he strikes that low and hard and finishes that one. But yeah, he certainly got a few chances and he's getting in the right positions. So hopefully he does get that goal when he gets in the side next.
Yeah, there were certainly early signs, and I know, of course, it was probably disappointing for himself and Boro fans that he didn't stick a few of them chances away. But certainly, as you say, one thing that impressed me with Connolly, almost in the same mould as Duncan Watmore, very quick on his feet and, looking to be really a defender's nightmare, because one loose touch and Connolly was pressing and wanting to nick the ball off defenders. So very good signs and promising early signs from him there. Just really now moving on to the second half, because I don't feel like, in the first half I was thinking it as much. But as the second half progressed up until Reading took the lead, I was starting to think, the typical Chris Wilder won December Manager of the Month. Boro were expected to win here. Reading have just come off the back of a 7-0 defeat and being knocked out of the cup by Kidderminster. This is going to be one of them games, isn't it? And then as the ball is floated to the back post by Deli Bashiru, and Carroll just leaps and nods the ball, as he has done so many times in his career, back across Lumley, and runs off in front of the family stand for some reason with his one-handed celebration. I mean, it was everything that I had envisaged in Nightmare that I'd mentioned on the podcast last week, because that goal just epitomised everything that Andy Carroll's about.
It did exactly that. We've seen it a few times in recent seasons. Andy Carroll visiting the Riverside and planting headers into that goal at the North Stand. It's certainly becoming quite the regular occurrence when he steps foot on that Riverside pitch, and it's horrible. It's just so predictable that Andy Carroll would be the one to score. Reading didn't really have any chances at all leading up to that, and one little glimpse of goal, and it is a fantastic header, by the way, looped straight into that top corner, just dipping underneath the crossbar, and Lumley had no chance really. But yeah, predictable Andy Carroll at the Riverside. We spoke about it, said that he was Reading's star man, said he was the one to watch, and I'm pretty sure that we just need to start being quiet on other teams' star players at this point, because every time we seem to mention a player, they seem to have a blinder against us, or at least score.
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, we do need to try and give some insight as to the opposition, but unfortunately at the moment it seems to be whoever we highlight then goes and scores against us in the following game. So it's not great, but we do have a job to do. So we'll try and give an insight without tempting fate in future. But really straight after that, and I thought we started the second half quite slowly actually, and of course we were punished for that. But quite quickly after, good work down the left from, I think it was Neil Taylor, lifts one into the box towards Sparrow. I think Sparrow flicks it on and it falls to Matt Crooks from probably a yard or two inside the penalty area, perfectly on the half volley. And to be honest, I was just expecting him to smash it in the back of the net and for us to then have sort of more time than we actually did do in the end to go and try and find a winner. But it just goes past sort of the post and the bar. And, at that point, I was really starting to worry and thinking, is that the chance that we'll look back at and really regret come the end of this game?
Yeah, it was a strike that looked like if it was going in, it was going to take the net off and hit someone in the back of the South Stand, if I was honest. It was hit with so much power, so much venom behind it. It looked like it was destined for that top corner. But yeah, as you say, watching that one sail in the South Stand, you thought, this just isn't going to be our day, this. And I think in recent years, this wouldn't have been our day, this Boro side that we're all used to, this club. We usually just fall into this pattern where if we concede one, it's us dead and buried, really. We're not going to go on and win the game in a game that we're not expected, but favourites to win this game against a side that are really struggling down the bottom of the division. And we're a side that has gone on a really good run in the last month. And it just didn't look like it was going to be our day until the last 10 minutes where it was just a Boro onslaught, really.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? And, quite strangely, really, moments before Crooks actually equalises, nigh on the same exact situation plays out. Tavernier whips the corner in left-footed, of course, from the right. It's headed out, and the first time, I think it was Isaiah Jones, which then just pops it back out to Tav. Tav delivers first time, and Crooks, wins his header. Goal bound, you're thinking this is just going to nicely nestle in the back of the net, and Luke Southwood pulls off a quite impressive save, really, in the top corner of the goal. And at that point, as I say, I was really starting to think, yeah, this is just not going to be our day. The run's coming to an end. It's all back to doom and gloom. Well, not doom and gloom, but being extremely disappointing. And then, as I say, Tavernier again delivers a corner. It's headed out. What more this time, I think, then threads the ball back out to Tav. Tav delivers. and Crooks doesn't mess about with the second one, straight into the roof of the net. I think Southwood parries it upwards, to be honest, but just the power of the header is too much, and Boro are back on level terms.
Yeah, and it was sort of a big sigh of relief around the ground at that point. It was like, right, we're back in this, but it wasn't we're back in this and we'll settle for a point. It was get the ball, we're going for the next one, and that's the sort of attitude that fans love to see, and it was fantastic because I haven't really seen that from Boro in a lot of my time watching us. It'd usually just be settle for the point and celebrate the goal, but we knew we had 5 minutes to go plus stoppage time, and this side just doesn't give in, does it really?
No, it certainly doesn't, and I think a lot of credit has to go to Chris Wilder again because, you know, he made substitutions that, in fairness, had almost sort of signs of Jonathan Woodgate, and I mean that with the utmost respect to Chris Wilder, because at one stage towards the at the end part of the game, Boro had 4 strikers on the pitch. You know, Coburn come on, played as a central striker. Sparrow stayed on the pitch and was slightly behind him in the 10. Watmore was slightly pushed out to the right, and of course Balogun was coming in off the left. And you thought, I mean, that is very brave because, you know, I never really feared once we'd scored that Reading were going to nick another one because of the way they play. You know, they don't counter-attack, so there wasn't really much of a chance of that happening. But it was incredibly brave for Chris Wilder. I can't even say his name. I'm that excited to talk about this winner. Incredibly brave. Dear me, Nathan. Incredibly brave of Chris Wilder to make those substitutions and really say, you know, we're not settling for a point. As you say, we want to get the 3 points. We want to continue this winning run. And that's exactly how it panned out. And of course, the goal itself, Paddy McNair. And another thing that I noticed just quickly before we talk about it, the way that we play now is it can be so frustrating watching because we are that patient now that typically over the years, last 5 minutes, if we're chasing the game, it's just lob it in the box and hope for the best in the nicest way possible. But now, you know, it is passed from side to side. They don't mind recycling the ball. Paddy McNair, I can think of plenty of times where him and Tavernier and Howson also come back and forward, switch the play, started again, switch the play again. And it was just that one chance that we needed. And McNair works it out to Isaiah Jones. And Jones, in the form he's in at the moment, I always felt that all afternoon he had the beating of Bristol, the Reading left back. And at the moment where it really mattered, he produces an obscene piece of skill, double step over, sends Bristol down the shop for a paper and a Lucasade, gets past him, delivers onto a plate, and Crooks is just there heading. And from that point onwards, it was just absolute pandemonium.
Yeah, fantastic. Just going back there, you could hear the murmurs, as you say, from the crowd when Isaiah Jones got the ball, knocked it into Tavernier. Tavernier comes inside, and instead of just putting the ball in the box, he knocks it into McNair, and you can sort of hear the groans. But we picked up on it. Who I go to the game with, that with Tavernier knocking that ball into McNair and then shifting back inside again and sort of trying to make a darting run back into the box or off the edge of the box, that isolates Jones on that right wing. And that's what we've been waiting for all day. We've been waiting for Jones to be able to stand Bristol 1v1 and just do him down that wing. He had the beating of him, and it was blatant to see he had the beating of him. And the chance that he got, he's got the ball out there, isolated him, done like 4 step overs, took him down the right hand side. The end product of Isaiah Jones is absolutely fantastic. It was spoken about earlier in the season. A few fans thought his end product weren't that good, but no, the stats and the assist tally of Isaiah Jones this season proves that that kid can put a ball in the box. And wow, what a fantastic ball that was, straight across the 6-yard box. And Crooks is there to head home. And I didn't actually realise at the time how late it was in the game, 90 plus 5. I thought maybe 90 plus 2 or 3, but 90 plus 5, again, it's the late show, as I said earlier on in the podcast. 3 stoppage time winners in a row, and it's another 3 points in the bag when it's a game probably where a point would have been fair, but we've nicked it at the death once again.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to get too carried away again, but you look at games like that, and there's a few obvious comparisons looking back at Aitor Karanka's promotion team and the season. Of course, we don't want Chris Wilder to walk out before the end of the season, but the Player of the Month and Manager of the Month award, both in December, strangely enough, both being won at the same time. All the late winners, and it is games like that and moments like that where you just think there's something special going on, and you can't quite put your finger on it and predict because you never know the way that football will go. But moments like that, it just shows that absolute, as you say, never say die attitude, and that Chris Wilder's instilled in his Boro team. And a lot was made earlier on in the season under Neil Warnock that first half in games actually wasn't Boro's problem. We were, more often than not actually in front in quite a lot of games. I think at one point we were top of the league if the season was just based off 45 minutes alone. And it was the second half that was letting Boro down in games, and perhaps, I think the running stats Chris Wilder highlighted, and he wasn't quite happy with the way that it was dropping off in the second half. But you look at his impact, and that's got to go as well as Chris Wilder. You have to give credit to strength and conditioning and, other work that's been done on the training ground to improve work rate and fitness, because, quite literally, again, until the last moments of the game, Boro still have, bursts of energy in the moments that matter. And of course, for the third time in a row, it's proved pivotal again. And we've gone and got a result that really we shouldn't have got, to be honest.
Yeah, and really, I think a lot of the onslaught in that last 10, 15 minutes sort of just tired Reading out, having to switch the play, Boro switching play from side to side, left to right, and tired Reading out, and we got our just rewards from doing that and being patient. 90 plus 5, it's becoming too much of a regular occurrence for Boro, and I'm not used to it, but these wins just keep rolling in, don't they? And it's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic to have these 3 points rolling in, and it makes your weekend so much better as well, and gets you ready for the week with a nice smile on your face.
Yeah, it certainly does, and it normally leads to, trips into town the following, well, not the following night, on the night of these games. And that did happen with myself and Nathan on Saturday night, and we made sure that we did celebrate on behalf of Matt Crooks, and I'm sure he would have been delighted, and I'm sure he would have celebrated himself as well. On Matt Crooks, Nathan, he, ironically enough, and I don't know how you feel about this, and it sounds ridiculous for me to say, but I actually thought it was one of Crooks's worst games in the Middlesbrough shirt up until he scored the 2 goals. And of course, it doesn't matter because he scored the 2 goals and he's won us the points, really. Of course, with assists from Tavernier and Jones, but he gets the vital touches on both goals. And again, he's proven that he's got so much because, under Wilder, okay, he scored in the first game under Millwall, but he'd actually, although he's had more of an advanced role, he'd been often more involved with putting Isaiah Jones in down the right or assisting Watmore at Huddersfield, for example. and the goals not dried up, but had sort of stopped a little bit. And then all of a sudden, Matt Crooks thinks, well, I haven't had my best game, but I'll just go and score two and make sure that the fans still love me as much as they already did. And that's the case. I mean, it's not only the two goals, it's just the fact that he's out with the South Stand after the game, singing his own lyrics about his hair being fine. And I just love him. I really do love him.
Yeah, and I think it goes for all of this side at the minute. I think all of them have just got so much personality and character, and it's a side that I think a lot of Boro fans are beginning to fall in love with and get a bit of that connection back between players and fans. And I think Wilder coming in has helped that, just by making sure that every single player in the squad goes over to applaud the fans after a game. And it is fantastic to see that unity, that togetherness in the side. And even the other day, I've just watched the Inside Match Day prior to filming this, and Piero, who hasn't really had that much of a sniff under Wilder at all, has he? He's on the pitch at full time, hugging and laughing with Matt Crooks. And you look at those two, and those two are probably vying for that right-sided midfield position. And yeah, but it just shows that despite there being obvious competitiveness within the squad for places, that there's no animosity between anyone. They all love each other, and it is fantastic to see. And just on Matt Crooks, as you say there, it wasn't his best game in the Middlesbrough shirt. I'd agree with you there. Out the midfield three, I thought he was having the poorer game out of the three, really. But with he's got certain attributes. His height is one of them, and he's outjumped Andy Carroll for the first one, for the equaliser. And what a fantastic ball from Marcus Tavernier as well. A lot said about Tavernier's end product, and me and you are usually his biggest critics for that. But in that passage of play, for both deliveries there, one that's cleared away and then the one that eventually leads to the equaliser, fantastic crosses. And even the ones before that results in the Southwood save, all fantastic deliveries, all right on the money, and not as inconsistent as we've seen them earlier in this season. So hopefully now he's got that one assist. Hopefully that leads to a run of him contributing a lot more to these goals that we're scoring at this current time.
Yeah, definitely. And it was nice to see Tavernier get an assist, wasn't it? Because as you say, a lot's been made of his end product. And, especially given the signing of Riley McGree, we can see on the right, it's quite obvious that it's Piero and Crooks. And, of course, Saliki, who, we'll get on to, and other players that have since been told this week that they can move on. There was never really too much competition for Tavernier. You always felt that he was just going to be in the team, sort of. And not that he doesn't deserve to be in the team, but he sort of didn't have that someone behind him, like really pushing him. But with the McGree signing now, it's added that extra little bit of competition. And obviously Tavernier has sort of risen to that straight away and got himself an assist and, given us a moment of quality when we needed it desperately, really. So just moving on from the Reading game, I'm sure we could have spent hours talking about it, but of course, there's so much to talk about again. Just what I touched on there before we get into some listener questions on the game. This week, we also did see the news that Chris Wilder has made a couple of Boro players available for transfer, and we obviously have also seen the departure of Onel Hernandez. Of course, to list them firstly, that would be Uche Ikpeazu, Marcus Brown, James Leah-Saliki, and Onel Hernandez. First on Hernandez we'll start with, because he's departed, his loan was cut short and he's joined Birmingham. I think, Chris Wilder really said it as well as what we could have. He's just been unfortunate because of the system that Wilder plays, and he actually was okay and done a pretty solid job filling in whilst we needed a little bit of energy and Watmore needed a little bit of a rest in that front too. But it just sort of happens that we don't play with wingers anymore, and unfortunately that means that Onel is going to be limited, or was going to be limited, with his game time. So for me, I wish Hernandez the best of luck going forward, and it's quite a shame really, because I do think he had something to offer still to this team.
Yeah, of course we saw him start a lot of the games over Christmas, and did quite a good job really in a position that he's not used to, in a front two. Of course, as you mentioned there, he's not a centre forward. He's not a false nine or anything. He's a winger by trade, and we don't play wingers. He's been forced to play a wing back under Neil Warnock earlier in the season, which of course again is his natural position. So he's pretty much been played everywhere but his natural position at Middlesbrough, and I think for that reason we hadn't seen the best of Onel Hernandez. And to be fair, it is probably best that at this stage of his career he does move on. He does get the game time that he wants, and I think a lot of Boro fans would just say good luck to him, because it looked like he was a fantastic member of the dressing room. And of course, at least we have those memories of him whipping his shirt off and throwing them into the crowd at Nottingham Forest, and then Bournemouth at home when it was offside.
Yeah, do you know what? I actually tweeted on the account about thanks for the memory of ripping his shirt off at Forest and sending that away end into pandemonium again, after probably one of the easiest goals he'll ever score in his career. But arguably the actual better moment, as you say, is the one against Bournemouth where he, wheels away and he realises he's offside. I mean, that for a large amount of that time in the second half of that game, I was just still laughing at that moment. So thank you, Onel, for both their moments, but even more so for the fact that you give us that absolute comedic genius, even though he didn't intend to, against Bournemouth. On to another player which is really sort of fallen into the bracket of someone that is just not going to fit into Chris Wilder's system and the type of player that he wants to have. I mean, I think I'm best asking you about this because I know that you feel strongly about Uche Ikpeazu and what he can offer Boro, and perhaps what getting rid of him may cost Boro. But it's quite clear to see, as we spoke about, Boro are not going to be that team anymore, that even if they are chasing a game, will swing balls into the box and hope for the best. And that means that Uche is probably going to move on. He's available for a loan or a permanent, but I know you're quite upset about this one, aren't you?
I am, but that is simply because I really, really like Uche as a footballer. Having watched a lot of Boro centre forwards in the last 10 years or so, I've only really seen a handful that I'd rate as actually good centre forwards. And Uche, for his style of play and his game, is simply fantastic. Hold up play up there with one of the best in the division, I'd say. Only really Mitrovic can compete with him at that hold up play. Physically, we all know what he's called Big Uche by Chris Wilder. Physically, he's an absolute beast. But most of all, his hard work for the team was simply fantastic, really. In recent years, we've had centre forwards that have sort of been picked at for maybe not looking like they put 100% into performances, but you can't say that about Big Uche, really. His effort is fantastic, and he does have flashes of quality as well. We saw from his debut in pre-season against Bishop Auckland when he's launched one at the top corner, that got me looking at him thinking this could be like a really good player for Middlesbrough. And of course, then in his last appearance for us at Mansfield last week, sent me into pandemonium when he's launched that one in the top corner. And if that doesn't win FA Cup third round goal of the round, then I want to know what does in its place, because it was a fantastic finish and the goal really summed him up, didn't it? Running, just palming lads off him that were pulling him back, grabbing his shirt, and he pings one at the top corner with his left foot. And what a fantastic celebration as well as a send-off, running over the away fans echoing his chant in that away end at Mansfield. And best of luck to Uche, because I think he's just a fantastic, fantastic footballer.
Yeah, he's certainly, to a specific taste when it comes to football fans. But as you say, over the years, there's been a lot of question marks with strikers in particular, really, in their sort of attitude and application. And, I think that's one thing and I don't want to undersell Uche, because it's not as simple as just to say he works hard, because he does offer more than that, as you say. You mentioned Mitrovic, Daryl Dike at West Brom now. Of course, he's only just joined the league. I think probably him, Mitrovic and Uche, as you say, are probably the three of the best. Even looking at the Premier League, and, it would be a big call, but certainly with his back to goal, I don't think you're probably going to find a more physical striker than Uche Ikpeazu. And, as you say, he hasn't left yet. He wasn't in the squad for the Reading game. So best of luck for Uche. And, perhaps maybe if something doesn't materialise, he could find his way back into the fold. But we'll hope for your sake, Nathan, because I know how much you love him. Moving on to, players that really now it was sort of expected again. And with Hernandez as well, we should say there was a slight bit of confusion because of the fact that Chris Wilder had said that they were both available for transfer. What obviously Wilder meant was literally that Saliki and Hernandez could leave the club. But of course, as what's happened with Hernandez, it meant that they had to terminate the loans. Saliki and Brown are similar in that they just haven't really played at all this season, and for different reasons, because of obviously Marcus Brown's injury. It's long term. A lot of people thought that he might go out on a loan and perhaps come back, but it seems as though that's actually a permanent move, and Sheffield United have been mentioned. And same with Uche, really. I'd wish Brown the best of luck. It's just unfortunate when his injuries happened. And on Saliki, I think really there was a lot of sort of high praise and good reports coming from France when we first signed him, and a lot of people were quite excited, but it just hasn't worked out for him. And Chris Wilder also mentioned the fact that he is away from potentially a full month at the AFCON. So I think that the club are looking at someone to potentially take on the loan and have him for the second part of the season. So with Saliki and Brown, of course, they haven't done anything particularly wrong. But again, I think it's the right move from the club.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. It's a bit of a shame with Marcus Brown, really. I think he got a run in the side about this time last year. I remember that Wycombe Wanderers away game when he scored and got us back into the game, pegging back Uche's opener for Wycombe on that day. And yeah, I thought he could have been a decent little player for us, but that injury at Brentford in the FA Cup has seemingly kept him out of action for a year, which is horrible, really. He's only a young player and he has suffered quite regularly with injuries, and best of luck to him again, because there is a talented player in there. You could see that. And of course, just a memory of Marcus Brown as well. He did score that goal against Bournemouth last year in the pilot fixture for fans back in the Riverside, which was the only time fans were in the stadium last season. And yeah, I'm sure the 1,000 that were in the ground that day will have loved that at the time. At the time that was scored, especially.
Yeah, definitely. So really moving towards the back end of the podcast now, and you know, we haven't had questions for a few weeks actually, but after that late winner, we had to bring them back. And you know, there were some quite interesting ones. There was a lot to do with Matt Crooks and, you know, things that we probably shouldn't mention on the podcast. Probably the cleanest version of one of these comments was from Danny, and he said, "Is it normal to want to watch Matt Crooks with my wife?" Now, I mean, obviously me and Nathan aren't married yet. Still a bit young for that. But I think after Matt Crooks's involvement in the win, it is a feeling that is quite normal, really, Danny. And yeah, not to go too in depth on that because, you know, it is quite a sensitive topic, really. I think if you're open to Crooksy getting in that situation, and by the sounds of it you are, then I couldn't think of a better man, really.
His feet would be sticking out the bed, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, the big tree would be
the big tree.
Yeah. So also on some of the quite funny, I did have a good chuckle at some of the responses. Alex asked, "Is Jones a better dribbler than Prime Kaka?" And to be honest, quite a simple answer from us. I think it's just a yeah, to be honest.
Yeah, probably Messi, Ronaldo, any player that you could possibly, Maradona, every single player, streets ahead.
Yeah. Now, Will, this was one that really caught my attention because I said this a few weeks back on the podcast and you almost laughed at me, and, you know, we're far from it yet. But I said, if this run of form continues, is there anything that stops us making a challenge for automatic promotion? Will has said, what's stopping us coming second? Nathan, answer me this. What is stopping us coming second?
At the time when you asked me this the other week, I thought, let's not get too carried away with things. We'd been on a good run, won a few games over Christmas. I think it was the pod that we did on Forest and Blackpool. I think this question was asked to me. It's fantastic results there. But an FA Cup win is gonna be slightly put on the back burner. I'm just gonna slightly skip past it because it's in a different competition. And a win against Reading, I don't want to skip over them too much, but it is simply just another 3 points at this stage of the season. I'm not trying to get too carried away with myself either, because at this current time, it is kind of difficult not to. It's not even as though Boro are on an unbeaten run at the minute. It's Boro on a winning run. We are winning a lot of games at this current stage of the season. And I think the only thing stopping us from getting second is ourselves, really. It's down to us to keep this winning run up. We've got a very, very difficult run of games coming up in the next 4 games. Just looking at the next 4. Blackburn away, difficult. We're going to get onto that next, but they're the form side in the division alongside ourselves. A very, very difficult test away from home. Coventry City at home, again, a big test. Just come off the back of a 4-1 away win, and they did beat us earlier in the season at the Ricoh Arena, a game that we'll not talk about too much. We'll skip past it. But Man United, FA Cup, sort of a one-off. But I think a lot of Boro fans will be going there thinking we can turn them over. And I do believe that we can as well. But we'll skip past that one because that's a conversation for another day. And lastly, it is QPR away, a side that are in the playoffs and beat West Brom, a playoff rival, on Saturday. And we saw from QPR earlier in the season, they are a really good side. They beat Neil Warnock's Middlesbrough with 10 men in that second half. So there's 4 games there. If you want to just class them as 3 league games with teams in and around those playoff places. I think come the end of this run of games, that'll give us a real indicator of where and if the automatic promotion places are possible come the end of the season.
Yeah, I echo all of that, to be honest, Nathan. I think you summed it up perfectly, to be honest. And really, yeah, to answer that question, I think it is ourselves. And, you know, apart from ourselves, I think the only other thing that would stop us and is stopping us at the moment from progressing even further is this Blackburn team that are on such a good run of form. And, you know, going into the Blackburn game now and previewing that, of course, as you mentioned, Blackburn at the moment, the current form side, top of the form side with 5 wins and 1 draw. Of course, we have the same record in terms of results. I think they may have scored a few more in those 6 games. But, you know, had Blackburn not been on such a good run of form, it probably may have been us in their position currently. They currently sit level on points with Bournemouth, I think, in joint second place. And, you know, I think the one real reason why they're in that position is the form of Ben Brereton Diaz. And, you know, we joked about it closer at the start of this season and the fact that he changed his name and added that Diaz because of the Chilean connection of his family. But since that podcast, really, earlier on in the season, he's just gone from strength to strength to strength. And now he's probably viewed as one of the hottest prospects in the league, really. And 20 goals in 26 league games is quite a ridiculous record, to be honest.
It is. It's a really, really good record. And at times he isn't even playing as a central striker either. He's playing off that left-hand side. It'll be interesting to see what Blackburn set up like next Monday night. Of course, the back 3 is how they're set up with wing backs, but sometimes they don't. They can either be 3-4-3 or a 3-4-1-2 with someone playing in that hole behind 2 strikers. But they have players that can hurt you. Reid Carter is another one. I'm sure he's been involved in 5 goals in his last 8 appearances. He's on loan from Brighton. Of course, we have a lot of ex-Boro players there as well. Ainsley Pears there as a backup goalkeeper. Daniel Ayala as well. And of course, the main connection there is Tony Mowbray, ex-Boro manager. And quite strangely enough, earlier on in the season, a lot of Blackburn fans were flagging up, is Tony Mowbray the right man to take them forward? And now they've found themselves in the automatic promotion picture and they're all fine and rosy with Tony Mowbray. So it shows how quickly football can turn around. And yeah, Diaz is another one. It's pretty much since he's added that Diaz to his surname, he's turned into this goal-scoring machine, and it's going to be a task to keep him quiet. But with the form that both sides are in, it's going to be a really, really good game.
Yeah, and just as you mentioned Brereton Diaz there, it seems as though, I mean, I'm not sure who's speeding past on a motorbike in the Lincoln area, Nathan, but yeah, who knows who it might be, to be honest. They clearly were excited by the thought of Ben Brereton Diaz as well.
It's just Isaiah Jones motoring up the right-hand side.
You know what? That's very good from you. That's quick thinking. I don't mind that at all. So fair play, Nathan. Yeah, just Isaiah Jones just jogging past the window, to be honest. That was at full speed either. But yeah, I think that really brings us towards the end of this episode. And, you know, I think this Boro Blackburn game is really, of course, it's on telly on Monday night on Sky Sports. Boro are going to have a strong away following, as we have done all season. And it not only for Boro and Blackburn fans, I think for the neutral, really, as you say, the two form sides in the division, it is a mouth-watering game, really, and it will certainly be fiercely contested. And God, I dread to think how excited and probably over the top I'm going to go if we do beat Blackburn, because, you know, they're a great side, they're on a great run of form, so it's going to be a difficult game. But, you know, at the moment, you can't rule out Boro going there and getting a result.
You can't. The nerves are slightly jangling, although it is a week until kickoff. The nerves are slightly jangling for this one. It is a big game. But now that we've bigged it up, we'll take a 0-0 draw.
Yeah, we'll take a point now, to be honest. Yeah, so I think that brings us to the end of that episode of the Boropolis Podcast. From me and Nathan, of course, as we usually do, we just throw a few shameless plugs in at the end of every episode now, don't we? We did promote the Twitter Live on Thursday night last week. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it. I'm not so sure if we will be able to do it this Thursday. We'll keep you updated with that. But in terms of rating and subscribing to the YouTube channel, of course, you know, I'm already going to ask you, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, show us support, like and comment on the videos. And for audio listeners, especially Apple Podcast, somehow, I don't know why people are that interested about me and you talking about Middlesbrough. We've crept into the sports news rankings on Apple Podcasts in the UK, so we must be doing okay, Nathan. So yeah, please do leave us a review on there and rate us 5 stars, as it does help other Boro fans to find us. But from me and Nathan, ahead of another interesting and busy week, I'm sure, for Middlesbrough, that has been another episode of the Boropolis Podcast. And thank you very much for listening and watching.